Good. Now I'll write the story. New names I'll use: Lucille, narrator/mother, Cooper, son, Simone Vance, fiancé Vienne, Hugh Stafford, real husband, Penelope Penny, their daughter, Gus, family driver caretaker, Miles, son's best man, Desmond, family friend. None of these appear in the banned list. The morning of my son's wedding, I burned my toast. That's how I remember it starting. Not with some dramatic premonition, not with thunder outside the window. Just me standing in my kitchen at 6:47 in the morning, watching a thin ribbon of smoke curl up from the toaster and thinking, that's strange. I never burn toast. I scraped the bread over the sink, rinsed the plate, and stood there for a moment with both hands braced on the counter. My heart was doing something I couldn't explain. Not racing exactly, more like stumbling. Like it kept losing the beat and then trying to find it again. Cooper's wedding day. I'd imagined this morning 100 times over the past 2 years. I'd pictured myself sitting at that same kitchen table, crying the good kind of tears, calling my sister in Phoenix to say he's really doing it, he's getting married. I'd imagined feeling proud and full and just slightly sad the way mothers are always slightly sad when their children choose someone who isn't them anymore. Instead, I stood there with burned toast in the trash and a feeling I couldn't name sitting low in my stomach. Stop it, Lucille. That's what I told myself. You've been carrying this feeling for 6 months and it hasn't become anything real yet. Not one concrete thing. That was the problem, I suppose. It was never one concrete thing. It was the way Simone laughed a half second after everyone else, like she was calculating when to join in. It was the way she touched the furniture in my living room the very first time Cooper brought her home. Not admiring it, but assessing it, running her fingers along the edge of my grandmother's sideboard, the way an appraiser does at an estate sale. It was the questions she asked, quietly, over dinner, that seemed less like getting to know you and more like taking inventory. How long has the family been in commercial real estate? Is Cooper the sole heir? Do you have a board, or is it all privately held? I told myself I was projecting. That's what mothers do when they're lonely and their sons are happy. We project. My husband Roland had been gone 4 years. I still cooked for 2 sometimes. Still reached for his hand in the dark. I dried my hands on a dish towel, walked upstairs, and stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom. Navy dress, pearl earrings, the low heels I'd broken in over 3 weeks so my feet wouldn't ache during the ceremony. I looked like a mother of the groom. I looked composed and gracious and glad. I did not feel any of those things. I was reaching for my second earring when I heard gravel shift outside. Gus, early. Augustus Nell had worked for our family for 18 years. He'd driven Roland to his last business trip. He'd driven me to the hospital the morning Roland's heart gave out without warning, without even the courtesy of a slow decline. Gus knew where every key in our house was kept. He'd taught Cooper to change a tire in this very driveway when Cooper was 15. He was not an employee. He was a fixture, a fact of our lives. He was never early. I watched him from the window. He stood beside the car with his hands in his pockets and his jaw set in a way I'd never seen before. Gus Nell was the most unreadable man I knew. Roland used to say, you could tell Gus the building was on fire and he'd say, understood, and walk you out at a measured pace. Whatever was on his face right now, it was costing him something to keep it there. I went downstairs. The morning air was warm. A soft May warmth that smelled like cut grass and someone's dryer sheets drifting from a window down the block. Beautiful morning. The kind you want to save somehow. Gus turned when he heard my heels on the porch steps. He crossed the driveway in 3 strides. Mrs. Bye, Lucille. His voice was quiet in a way that meant, not yet, not here. There's something you need to know before Cooper comes out. And there's something you need to see. But I need you to trust me about how we do this. I looked at him carefully. Gus, what did you find? Not here. He glanced toward the house. I need you in the backseat. Covered. Cooper can't know you're listening. Not yet. Not until you've seen it yourself. You want me to hide in your car? Yes, ma'am. On my son's wedding morning. Yes, ma'am. His voice didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. I made a promise to Mr. Rowland. 18 years ago, he hired me and shook my hand and said, "These people are my family, Gus. You understand what I mean by that?" I said, "Yes, sir. I meant it." He paused. "I'm asking you to trust 18 years. Rowland's name in his mouth was like a key turning. I looked toward the front door. Through the glass panel, I could see light in the hallway. Cooper would be down any minute, straightening his tie in the hallway mirror, probably already talking to his best man Miles on the phone. "How long have you known?" I asked. 3 weeks, I suspected. 3 days, I was sure. This morning, I confirmed. He opened the rear door. "I needed you to see it yourself, because you'll need to be certain." I looked at the open door. There was a folded blanket on the seat, soft and dark. I looked at Gus. I thought about what certain means and what it costs. Then I picked up the hem of my dress and climbed in. The blanket smelled like cedar. I lay on my side in the back seat, knees bent, dress bunched, 63 years old and hiding like a child playing a game I didn't understand yet. I kept my breathing slow and deliberate. I had read somewhere once that the body takes its cues from the breath. If you breathe slowly, the panic believes you. I heard Cooper come out of the house 4 minutes later. "Morning, Gus." His voice was bright. Just slightly too bright, the way people sound when they're nervous and try not to be. "Where's my mom?" "She had some things to see to this morning." Gus's voice was perfect, unhurried, unreadable. "Said she'd meet you at the church. She wanted to get there ahead of the guests." "Oh." A pause. Then, softer. "She's okay, though. She seemed off last night." "She's fine, sir. Just being a mother." Cooper laughed, and the sound of it, unguarded, genuine, the same laugh he'd had since he was 8 years old, went straight through me like a blade. He got in the passenger seat. I did not move. I did not breathe. His phone rang almost immediately. "Hey, babe." His voice changed when he said it. Softened. That specific softening men do for one particular person and no one else. It used to make me glad to hear it. Now it made me close my eyes. Simone's voice filled the car. She must have been on speaker. Warm, musical, with that slight breathiness she deployed when she wanted to seem unguarded. "Good morning. How are you feeling?" Honestly, like I might actually pass out. He laughed, but the good kind, is that a thing? "Good passing out?" "That's a thing," she said. "After today, everything falls into place." Falls into place. Not everything changes the way you'd expect. Not our life starts. Falls into place. Like something had been out of alignment and the wedding was the correction. I filed it away. They talked for a few minutes. The flowers, the reception, whether Cooper remembered his vows card, small talk that felt rehearsed on her side and genuine on his. Then his phone buzzed. A second call cutting in. "Hold on, someone's trying to come through." Unknown number. He sounded unbothered. "Probably spam." "Ignore it." Simone's voice sharpened. "Just briefly, just 1 degree. You don't need distractions this morning, sweetheart." "Yeah, you're right." He let it go to voicemail. They said their goodbyes. "I love you." 3 syllables that I'd watched Simone Vance produce for 2 years like a woman who knew exactly what they were worth. The call ended. Silence for maybe 30 seconds. Then the unknown number called again. Huh. Cooper checked the screen. Same number. 3rd time. His voice had shifted slightly, the careful brightness dropping. "Let me just," he answered. "Hello." Whatever the other person said, I couldn't hear it. I heard Cooper's response. "I told you not to contact me." His voice was low, measured, but underneath it ran something that I had to force myself to name correctly. Not irritation, not inconvenience. Fear. My son was afraid of this voice on the phone. "We said Monday. I need until Monday." A pause. "I understand. I'll handle it." He hung up. "Everything all right, sir?" Gus asked, his tone as mild as if he were asking about the weather. Yeah. Cooper forced a laugh that didn't reach. Just some vendor issue with the venue. You know how it is? Of course. But I could hear him in the seat ahead of me, the way his weight shifted, the way his breathing had changed. My son was carrying something he hadn't told me. He was going to that altar carrying it, and he thought that once he was on the other side of those vows, it would be settled somehow. What are you trying to fix, Cooper? The car turned left when it should have gone straight. I knew the route to St. Andrews the same way I knew the road to Roland's grave. By heart, by grief, by every time I'd driven it alone. Gus. Cooper noticed it too. This isn't the way. Simone sent a message, sir. Gus's voice was perfectly steady. Small emergency at a friend's place. She asked if you could swing by. Oh. Cooper's phone chimed. He read it. Yeah, she says, yeah, okay. Does she have the address? I have it. The neighborhood changed gradually. The wide, shaded streets near our house narrowed. The houses grew smaller, the yards less tended. Nice enough. Just different. Not the world Simone had presented herself as inhabiting. Weird, Cooper said, half to himself. I've never heard her mention anyone who lived out here. The car stopped. She said to come inside, Cooper said. She's upstairs. Of course, sir. Gus paused, just a fraction of a second. I'll wait out here. The door opened. Closed. Footsteps on concrete, growing fainter. Gus's voice came immediately, low and urgent. Mrs. Lucille, come out now. We have about 10 minutes. I pushed the blanket off. The light hit me hard, morning sun full and unfiltered. I blinked, sat up, let Gus help me out. My knees were stiff. I didn't care. I stood on the sidewalk and looked at where we were, a small house, single-story, cream-colored siding, shutters needing paint. A child's plastic tricycle tipped over near the mailbox. Ordinary, quiet, the kind of street where people know each other's dogs' names. I looked at the mailbox. Stafford. Gus. My voice was barely sound. Her name is Vance. Her maiden name is Vance. He guided me, carefully, toward the side of the house, away from the front door, away from the window Cooper had entered through. She took it back after she thought the first marriage was over. It wasn't. How long have they been legally married? 5 years. He stopped me at the corner of the house where a small side door opened onto a concrete landing, just visible through a gap in the fence. Stand here, don't move. She's going to come out that door. She doesn't know you're here. She doesn't know anyone is watching. I pressed my back against the fence and waited. Here is what I want to tell you about the next 10 minutes, because people always ask me later how I stayed standing. I thought about Roland. That's all. I thought about his voice when he was angry at something dishonest. Don't look away from it, Lucille. A thing doesn't stop being true because you stop looking. The side door opened. Simone stepped out in jeans and a pullover, her hair loose, nothing like the polished woman who attended our family dinners in silk blouses. She moved with quick efficiency, no performance in her, the way people walk when they believe no one is watching. A little girl came through the door after her, maybe 5 years old. Red sneakers. Dark curls like her mother's. She wrapped both arms around Simone's legs and tilted her face up. Do you really have to go, Mama? Something in my chest stopped moving. Simone crouched down. Her voice, when she spoke to the child, was the first genuine thing I'd ever heard from her. Just for today, baby. Just this one day. A man appeared in the doorway behind them. Early 40s. Kind face, tired. The kind of tired that comes not from one bad night, but from years of something wearing you down. He looked at Simone with an expression I recognized immediately because I have worn it myself, the expression of someone who loves a person they can no longer trust. He called again, the man said. Vickers, if we don't, Hugh. Her voice went flat. Cooper is inside. Hugh Stafford. She'd kept his name on the mailbox. In this house, she apparently still shared part of her life with the daughter she had never once mentioned to my son. Hugh's jaw tightened. I don't like this. I've never liked this. You think I like it? She stood, turned to face him, and her voice dropped to something quick and cold. Do you know what Vickers said he'd do if we miss another payment? To Penny? He was specific, Hugh. He was very specific. She stepped closer. 1 year? That's all I'm asking. 12 months of marriage to Cooper Aldridge, and the family accounts are accessible. Joint filing, insurance beneficiary, trust access, all of it. We pay Vickers everything. We disappear. We start clean. Penny never knows any of this happened. Hugh stared at the ground. He's a good man. Cooper, I know he is. He doesn't deserve, I know. Her voice didn't change. But Penny does deserve to be safe. And this is how I make her safe. She touched his face briefly with a familiarity that told me everything. This was not a dead marriage. Whatever it was not dead. Trust me. The little girl had wandered a few feet away and was examining a dandelion with intense concentration. Mama, she said without looking up, are dandelions wishes or weeds? Simone looked at her daughter for a long moment. Something moved through her face that I don't have a clean word for. Both, baby. They're both. Then Cooper's voice came from inside the house, muffled through the wall. Simone, you about ready? We shouldn't be late. And I watched her transform. It was not subtle. It was not gradual. She pulled her shoulders back, softened her jaw, let the warmth rise into her eyes like someone turning up a lamp, and by the time she stepped back through the side door, she was already Simone Vance again, radiant, warm, the woman my son had chosen. Hugh watched her go. Then he looked out at the yard, at his daughter still investigating the dandelion, and I have never seen a man look so entirely alone. I stepped out from the fence before I'd consciously decided to. He heard the movement and turned, and when he saw me in my navy dress with my pearl earrings and my mother of the groom face, I watched the blood drain out of his cheeks. My name is Lucille Aldridge, I said. My voice was steady. Roland had always said I had a voice for hard conversations. I'd never understood what he meant until that moment. Cooper Aldridge is my son. Hugh Stafford closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were full of a grief so specific I could map its edges. I know, he said. I know who you are. Then you know why I'm here. He looked at his daughter. She had blown the dandelion now and was watching the seeds drift. Her sneakers were untied. He noticed that, stepped forward, crouched down, and tied them with the steady patience of someone who had done it 500 times. Go inside and watch your show, Bug, he said. Daddy needs to talk to someone. Okay. She kissed his cheek with complete trust and went inside. He straightened and looked at me, and everything about him said I have been waiting for this to catch up with us. Tell me everything, I said. He did. They had met 7 years ago. Simone Vance, 29 years old, working in commercial insurance, sharp and strategic and magnetic. He'd loved her completely. They'd married at a courthouse in Georgia 5 years ago. Quiet ceremony, just 2 witnesses. Penny was born 18 months later. Then came Vickers, a private lender, that's the polite term. A man Hugh had borrowed $40,000 from when Penny was born premature and spent 11 days in the NICU, and their insurance fought every single claim. The loan had fees that compounded in ways Hugh hadn't understood. The 40 became 80. The 80 became a number that no amount of ordinary work would ever close. Simone found out about your family about 18 months ago, Hugh said. He sat at his kitchen table, hands flat on the surface, not meeting my eyes. She'd already been doing research on wealthy families in the area, looking for, she called it a solution. She found Cooper through a charity event he was profiled in. She spent 3 months studying your family before she introduced herself to him. I thought about that night. The hospital benefit. Cooper calling me afterward, voice lit up. Mom, I met someone. She was incredible. She actually knew who Dad was. Of course she did. I have the documentation, Hugh said. Our marriage certificate, financial records, the texts she sent planning this. He looked up. I kept them because part of me knew, eventually, I was going to have to make a choice. And have you made it? A long pause. He glanced toward the hallway where Penny had disappeared. She is my daughter, he said. Vickers' threats are real. I am genuinely terrified for her. He paused. But what Simone is doing to your son is also real, and He stopped. He seems like a decent man, and I've been letting this happen. That makes me. He couldn't finish the sentence. It makes you human, I said. And scared. And wrong. I said it without cruelty. But you can still choose right now. He looked at me. Come to the church, I said. Bring the documents. I will arrange for Penny to be protected, not symbolically, not as an afterthought. I will have people there whose job it is to make sure Vickers cannot touch her. You have my word, your word. My husband built a business for 30 years on his word. I have kept it for 4 years since he died. Ask anyone who knows the Aldridge name what it means when we give it. Hugh was quiet for a long moment. She needs to be safe, he said finally. Whatever else happens, Penny needs to be safe. She will be. He went to the bedroom and came back with a folder. Our marriage certificate, photographs spanning years, printed text messages, bank statements showing Simone's research into our holdings. I read 3 lines of the texts and stopped. It was enough. It was more than enough. Gus appeared in the doorway. He had a talent for appearing at the exact necessary moment. Mrs. Lucille, the ceremony starts in 90 minutes. Cooper thinks we're en route. He looked at Hugh. Mr. Stafford, I've already been in contact with someone who handles security quietly. Your daughter will be watched every moment. You have my personal word alongside Mrs. Aldridge's. Hugh looked at him. Then at me. Then at me. Then at the folder in his hands. He nodded once. Back entrance to the church, Gus said. Wait there until I signal. Keep Penny with you. Don't let Simone see you. We left. I walked into my own house like nothing had happened. Cooper was in the living room with Miles. Both of them in their suits, Miles trying and failing to convince Cooper that the slight crease in his jacket lapel was invisible. They were laughing. Cooper's laugh when he doesn't know he's being watched is the best thing I've ever heard. Mom. He saw me and came across the room, and the relief on his face made me realize he'd been more worried about me than he'd let on. You okay? You were gone a while. Just needed air. I hugged him, and I held it a second longer than usual. He let me. Big day. Huge day. He pulled back, studying my face with those eyes that look exactly like Roland's when Roland was thinking hard about something. You sure you're okay? I'm sure. I straightened his collar. Same gesture I'd made for every important thing in his life. You look exactly like your father. He smiled, and it was the most painful thing in the room. Miles clapped him on the shoulder. We need to head out in 15. I went upstairs, closed my bedroom door, stood in front of Roland's photograph on the nightstand. Not our wedding photo, but the one from Cooper's first Little League game. Roland crouched down with his hand on Cooper's shoulder, both of them squinting into the sun, both of them grinning at something off camera. I had loved Roland so much, and he had loved Cooper so carefully, and there was nothing in either of us that had prepared Cooper for someone like Simone Vance. I put my hand on the frame. I know, I told him, not out loud. I know it's gonna hurt him, but the alternative is worse. You taught me that. You always said the short pain is kinder than the long one. My phone showed a message from Gus. Stafford, in position. Back lot. Security confirmed. Ready. I typed back. So am I. St. Andrews was everything a wedding church should be. Stone facade, heavy oak doors, the kind of building that makes you feel the weight of promises before you've even gone inside. Cars filled the lot. Guests in their finest, the murmur of 100 good moods drifting across the warm afternoon. I sat in the front pew, in the spot where I'd sat at my own wedding 31 years ago. Same church, same light through those tall windows, fracturing into color across the stone floor. The organ opened with something stately. Guests rose. The processional began. Bridesmaids, flowers, the accumulated beauty of 2 years of planning. Then the doors opened wider. And Simone came down the aisle looking like a dream. She was breathtaking. I mean that plainly, without bitterness. The dress was perfect. The veil caught the light. She moved with the kind of composed grace that I had mistaken for character for 2 years. Every person in that church believed in her. You could see it on their faces. Cooper's face, when he saw her, was the worst part. He pressed one hand to his chest, and his eyes went bright with tears, and he looked at her the way Roland used to look at me across rooms. He loves her, I thought, and then immediately, he loves someone who doesn't exist. I scanned the room without moving my head. Gus, near the side door, practically invisible. Hugh and Penny in the far back corner, partially screened by a column. A small woman in a gray blazer stood about 10 feet from Hugh's security, I assumed. Someone Gus had arranged. Penny sat on Hugh's lap holding a small stuffed rabbit, whispering something to it. Simone reached the altar, took Cooper's hand, turned to face Reverend Okafor. The ceremony proceeded. I measured my breathing. Dearly beloved. The traditional opening, the word beloved. The traditional opening, the word beloved, landing strangely in my ears. We are gathered here in the sight of God and these witnesses, the readings, the prayers. Corinthians, always Corinthians, patient and kind and keeping no record of wrongs. I looked at Cooper's profile. He was going to say his vows in about 4 minutes, and they were going to come from the most honest place in him, and they were going to be received by someone who had researched his net worth before learning his last name. Reverend Okafor's voice rose and settled into the familiar cadence. If anyone here present knows of any lawful impediment to this marriage, let them speak now, or forever hold their peace. The silence. I had been sitting in that silence for 6 months. I stood. The movement made a sound in the quiet fabric, the slight creak of the pew, and I felt every head turn before I'd said a word. I do. My voice carried clean and clear to the back wall. I have cause, and I won't hold my peace. The room erupted. Not loud, not immediately. It was more like the sound a boat makes when you drop something heavy into still water, the ripple moving outward, fast, the collective intake of breath, the whispers that ignited simultaneously across the pews. Cooper turned. His face went through 3 things in 1 second. Confusion, then a desperate hope that he'd misheard, then a grief that already knew. Mom. His voice was barely controlled. What are you doing? I walked toward the altar. Measured steps. I'd learned from Roland that when you have to deliver something unbearable, you don't rush. Rushing makes it look uncertain. Simone's composure held for about 4 seconds longer than anyone else's. Then it cracked. Not dramatically, just a sudden stillness, a very slight blanching, the way a face changes when it realizes the thing it feared most has arrived. Mrs. Aldridge. Her voice was steady but wrong, the warmth replaced by something mechanical. This isn't appropriate. Whatever you think, the woman standing at this altar, I said, is married to someone else, legally, currently, and has been for 5 years. The ripple became a wave. Cooper's hand dropped from Simone's. He stepped back without seeming to realize he'd done it. Miles put a hand on his arm. That's not, Simone started. Her name at the time of her marriage was Simone Vance Stafford. I looked at her steadily. Her husband's name is Hugh. Their daughter's name is Penelope. She is 5 years old, and she calls her mother Mama, and I watched her do it this morning. The silence that followed that was different from the earlier one. It was the silence of a room trying to process something it doesn't have a category for. Cooper. Simone turned to him, her voice breaking in a way that sounded almost real. Listen to me. Your mother has never wanted. Say his name, Cooper said. Very quietly. Simone stopped. If she's lying, Cooper said, each word careful and slow, then say his name and tell me it's not true. 12 seconds. I counted them. Movement at the back of the church. Hugh walked down the center aisle with Penny on his hip, the small woman in gray behind them both. Penny had her rabbit tucked under one arm and was looking around at the flowers with the frank curiosity of a 5-year-old who does not understand what is happening but finds the building very interesting. "Daddy," she said clearly into the silence, "why is everybody standing up?" "Just because," Hugh said. He walked until he was at the foot of the altar steps. He looked at Cooper with the expression of a man who has done something terrible and knows it and cannot undo it. Only stop adding to it. "My name is Hugh Stafford," he said. "Simone and I have been married 5 years. I have our marriage certificate." He held up the folder. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I couldn't let this continue." Cooper was absolutely still. I watched my son stand there in his wedding suit in the church where his father and I had married, and I watched him understand. I could see the understanding arrive like weather moving in. His face didn't collapse. He was Roland's son. He held it. "Simone," he said. His voice was quiet enough that the people in the back pews had to lean forward. "Did any of it? Any of it? Did you mean any of it?" Simone looked at him. Her face was wet. I don't know whether those were real tears. I no longer had confidence in my ability to read her. She started. "The truth?" Cooper said. "Not the version, the truth." She looked down at her bouquet. White flowers that had been chosen for this exact day, for exactly this moment of standing beside him. She didn't answer. That was her answer. Reverend O'Coffer had been standing very still through all of this, and now he found his voice. "I cannot continue this ceremony. I think we need to. I've already contacted the authorities," Gus said from near the side door, and his voice was the calmest thing in the room. "They should be arriving now." The main doors opened. 2 officers walked in. They moved without urgency, steady and professional, and every person in that church who had been hoping this was somehow a misunderstanding understood, in that moment, that it was not. "Simone Vance," the first officer said, "we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of marriage fraud, bigamy, and fraudulent misrepresentation. You have the right to remain silent." Penny made a small sound and turned her face into Hugh's shoulder. "It's okay, Bug," Hugh said softly. "Close your eyes for a minute." She did, and he held her tighter, and I looked at the 2 of them and felt something that I did not expect to feel in that moment, a kind of sorrow that had nothing to do with anger. A child who had no idea, a man who had made wrong choices from a place of genuine desperation. The world is rarely divided as cleanly as we need it to be. The officers let Simone down the aisle. She looked back once, at Cooper. And I saw it then. Not remorse exactly, but something adjacent to it. The look of someone who got what they planned for and found it had cost more than the ledger showed. Cooper watched her go. He didn't move until the doors closed. Then he sat down on the altar steps in his wedding suit, right there in front of 400 people, and put his head in his hands. I sat beside him, not touching, not speaking, just present, the way you are when there is nothing to say that helps, and presence is the only offering you have. Miles sat on his other side. After a while, the guests began to move. Quietly, carefully, the way people leave a room where something irreversible has happened. Desmond Howell, who had been Roland's oldest friend, stopped beside me on his way out and put his hand briefly on my shoulder without speaking. I covered it with mine for a moment. When the church was nearly empty, Cooper lifted his head. "How long?" he asked. I suspected for months. I was certain this morning. He processed that. "Why not yesterday? Why not last week?" I looked at my hands. "Because if I'd come to you a week ago with suspicion and no proof, you would have defended her. You would have come to me later and said, you never gave her a chance. And you would have been right to say it." I paused. I needed you to be able to believe me. That meant I needed proof, real proof, in hand, in front of witnesses. Cooper was quiet for a long moment. "I would have defended her," he said. "You're right. I would have." He exhaled slowly. "I feel like an idiot." "You're not an idiot. You were in love with a performance that someone had spent 18 months rehearsing specifically for you. That's not stupidity. That's just being a person who believed what they were shown. He looked up at the window above the altar, a saint I've never been able to identify, rendered in blues and golds. Did she feel anything? He asked. Do you think any part of it was real? I don't know, I said honestly. I think she may not know either. He nodded slowly, like he was filing that answer somewhere he could return to later. We sat there for another few minutes in the quiet church, light shifting through the stained glass, the scent of the flowers beginning to seem almost too much. Then Cooper stood, straightened his jacket with the same gesture Roland always used, and held out his hand to help me up. Let's go home, he said. 4 months later, Cooper knocked on my office door on a Tuesday morning and came in carrying a coffee for each of us and the Hargrove Project proposal under his arm. He looked like himself. Not the self from before Simone. That self was gone, and I had come to understand that grief is appropriate when something genuine is lost, even if what was lost was partly illusion, but a version of himself that was learning to stand on the ground of what was actually real. He set the coffee on my desk and sat down across from me. For a moment, we both just looked at Roland's photo on the credenza. Therapist says I'm making good progress, he said. I believe her. She also says I need to stop apologizing to myself for not seeing it sooner. He glanced at me. I thought maybe that was something you needed to hear too. I looked at him. Maybe. You saw it from the beginning. You just couldn't prove it. He wrapped both hands around his coffee. You kept quiet for 2 years because you didn't want to be the mother who couldn't let her son move on. And then when it mattered, you didn't keep quiet. He paused. I'm not sure most people could have held both of those things at once. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing, which I think was the right answer. Prosecutor's office called, he added. 3 to 5 years, with the fraud charges. Hugh has full custody of Penny. They're doing better. He looked at his coffee. I'm not angry at him. I thought I would be, but I'm not. He was a man trying to protect his daughter with the only person he trusted to help him do it, and that person chose a method he knew was wrong. That's a particular kind of trapped. A pause. I feel for Penny most. She didn't choose any of it. She has her father. She does. We worked through the Hargrove proposal. Mid-morning light came through the windows the same way it had for 30 years in this room, falling across Roland's desk, which had become my desk and would become Cooper's desk in time. The ordinary persistence of things. At some point, Cooper looked up and said, Gus asked if he could come to Sunday dinner. I told him obviously yes. What a question. Obviously yes, I agreed. Good. He gathered the papers. I'm going to run these by legal. He stood, then paused at the door. Mom. You risked my anger. You knew I might not forgive you, and you did it anyway. He looked at the doorframe for a moment. I want you to know, I understand that now. What it cost you. I understand it. I thought about Roland. I thought about standing at a kitchen counter at 6:47 in the morning, burning toast, and knowing something was wrong and choosing, finally, to trust that knowledge all the way to the end. You would have done the same for me, I said. He thought about that, then nodded once like it was a promise rather than a question, and left. I turned back to the window. Outside, the ordinary afternoon. Traffic, birdsong, someone's radio drifting from somewhere down the block. All of it continuing the way it always does, regardless of what falls apart and what holds. I sat for a moment in the quiet. We're all right, I told Roland. We're going to be all right. I believed it. I burned toast that morning. That's the detail I keep coming back to, even now. Not the church, not the handcuffs, not the way Cooper sat on those altar steps in his wedding suit with his head in his hands. The toast, because I think that was the last moment where everything was still ordinary and I was still a woman who could tell herself she was being paranoid. I wasn't being paranoid. I never was. And that's the part that took me the longest to sit with. For 2 years, I watched Simone run her fingers along my furniture like she was pricing it. I heard her ask questions about our portfolio that no one asks unless they already know the answers matter. I felt the wrongness of her the way you feel weather before it arrives. And I said nothing because I was so afraid of being the mother who couldn't let her son move on, the mother who saw rivals in every woman her child loved. I made myself small to make space for Cooper's happiness. I thought that was generosity. It wasn't generosity. It was fear dressed up as kindness. Here is what I understand now that I didn't then. When you suppress what you genuinely know to avoid a difficult conversation, you're not protecting anyone. You're just delaying the damage and letting it compound. Simone had 18 months to build something airtight because I gave her 18 months. Every dinner I smiled through, every question I didn't ask, every instinct I overrode, that was time she used. I don't say that to punish myself. I say it because it's true, and true things are worth looking at directly even when they're uncomfortable. What finally changed wasn't my courage. It was Gus. He was the one who did the work, gathered the proof, made the calls, arranged the protection for Penny. All I had to do, ultimately, was stand up in a church and say 2 words, I do. The hardest part of that was not the public embarrassment, not the gasps, not the fear that Cooper would hate me. The hardest part was that I had to be willing to be wrong. I had to be willing to destroy a beautiful morning on the chance that I was right. And I had spent 2 years not being willing to do that. What happened to Simone wasn't bad luck. She built a plan on a foundation of other people's trust, and foundations like that don't hold. They can't. Not because the world is magical or fair, but because deception at that scale requires so many moving parts. So many people staying silent, so many coincidences cooperating. Hugh was always going to reach a point where he couldn't continue. Gus was always going to notice something. Truth doesn't need to be dramatic to surface. It just needs time and one person who refuses to look away. Cooper is healed enough now to laugh again. Not the carefully managed laugh of someone performing recovery, but the real one, the one that sounds like him. He told me last month that he's learned to sit with uncertainty without needing to resolve it immediately, that he asks more questions now before he trusts, that he's slower to fill silence with what he wishes were true. Those are hard things to learn. I would have given anything for him to have learned them differently. But he learned them, and they will protect him for the rest of his life in ways I cannot. That, I think, is what I want anyone who hears this story to take away. Not that you should be suspicious of love. Not that instincts are infallible. Not that standing up in a church is heroic. Just this: the people who love you deserve your honesty more than they deserve your silence. Even when the honesty is hard. Especially when it is. Every time I chose comfortable silence over a difficult truth, I thought I was being kind. I wasn't. I was being afraid. And there's a cost to that. And it isn't always you who pays it. Speak when you know something. Even if your voice shakes. Even if they don't believe you yet. Even if it costs you the morning.